On any other Veterans Day, we would have gathered together as a community on the city green to pay tribute to those who served, but this year we're forced to do things a little differently. Instead of honoring our veterans with an event as we've done in previous years, this year we've produced a video tribute to acknowledge our neighbors, friends, and family members who've served our great nation. Let's hear from some veterans that served during World War II all the way to the present, each with ties to Sandy Springs, and we'll learn what service meant to them. They'll share unforgettable experiences and reflect on lessons they've learned that they've taken with them over the years.
Every veteran has their own reason of why they joined the military. Why did you join?
There were flight schools everywhere. I started up in Roanoke, Virginia. I was in college my freshman year when I had a choice. Now, you want to be drafted or you want to be a pilot? You really get to know each other flying, because if I get in trouble, I got 3 guys that'll sacrifice themselves to help me if necessary.
So it's a recording of every mission you were on, and it looks like here, if I'm reading it right, it had the date.
Yeah.
It had the type of machines.
Yeah.
It said Okinawa to Guam.
Yeah.
So this was right after invasion of Okinawa.
Yes, sir. We flew 4.5 hours, and then the next day was 3.1 hours, and that's when we got the 4.5 dates. The date was the name of the Japanese put on the airplane. If it was done in red ink, then you were in.
Your gaze with the enemy.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
You learned that at least 2 stay together, but 2 always work together. You don't ever split up on singles. The last thing you do is to bail out. And we laughed about all of that. How much water is it in the Pacific?
So there was one instance when they were trying to shoot you down.
Yeah, they peel off. They come in and make a 1, 2, 3, 4, and they come in and they pick whoever they want. The bullet came through my windshield, right at the pepper of my gun sight, just like I'm looking at you. We never found the bullet.
Oh, you never found the bullet?
Oh, gosh, no.
Okay.
But we damn near tore that Corsair apart, I must tell you. The war's over, and we're going to do something today, and we'll never have another chance. So let's peel off, and the 4 of us fly over this particular spot. Technically, that was the end of the war. The funny part about it is that they were doing this on the radio. My sister was reading, and her husband was listening to this because the war was about over. And she wanted to know, we wondered where you were. I thought, isn't that strange? We're on the opposite sides of the earth. She's my sister, and now she's hearing about me on the radio. And hell, I don't know if she's on the radio listening, or that we're broadcasting this, because General MacArthur was the one that said, we will let the world know that the war is over. At the end of the war, you wonder, how many did we lose? The great part of the Marine Air Corps was, we will bring you home first. We will bring you home first.
Every veteran has their own reason of why they joined the military. Why did you join?
So I have family members that were Marines, Army. I even have one that's Air Force, and at the time I was just kind of going back and forth about military and college, and I had an awesome recruiter show up to my door one day after taking the ASVAB, and he just kind of persuaded me to join the Marine Corps. So my job was just to supply the base with anything that they needed, whether it was them being deployed, so I had to make sure they had all their gear, whether it was any of the Marines that were stateside and they just needed parts for their vehicles. We just made sure we got everything ordered to to get to them. I was deployed in 2009, a year after joining, and my first reaction was, oh no. But of course, because you hear all the terrible stories about what's going on or what could possibly happen while you're there. And once I got there, it eased my mind a little. I would have to say my mentor. His name was Sergeant Rock at the time, and he motivated everyone, and it doesn't matter what was going on. It could be the worst thing in the world could be happening, and he just pushed you to continue. So the one thing that I love about the Marine Corps is they call cadence, which is, pretty much songs that they sing while you're out on a hike or while you're out running or whatever the case is. And he was a singer. And so when he would sing his cases, you could hear it in his soul, like he loved to sing cadence. And he would always just look at us and say, never let anyone tear you down. And I think that, and he had a really, really deep, raspy voice because he was a drill instructor. But he would just always give you words of motivation. Never let anyone tear you down. Keep pushing, keep going. I don't care what anyone says to you. Keep doing it. Not fighting everything that comes your way. Everything doesn't deserve a fight. It doesn't. There are things that do, but not the small things in life. Just not giving up, just continuing, just finishing a project that you start. It could be something very small, because the Marine Corps, they're meant to break you down to build you back up.
Sergeant John P. Smith, Sandy Springs Police Department. I served in the United States Air Force from 1988 to 1996. While I was an active duty member, I was a part of Desert Storm, Desert Shield, Provide Hope, and Operation Provide Comfort. I joined the military right out of high school, about 6 months after high school. I went to Bronx Community College for about 6 months, and I just decided that I wanted to see the world and, of course, go to school and earn some valuable skills while doing all of that. Also, like the fact that I would be serving my country. I was on a temporary duty assignment in Angola, Africa. This was back in 1993. They were having their first democratic elections, and the United States, as well as the Soviet Union, were both there. The United States was backing one faction, and the Soviets obviously were backing the other. While we were there, I kind of had this romantic idea of going to Africa as a black person, or as an African American, however, And when we got there, the people didn't see a black American or white American. All they saw were Americans. So that was an eye-opener to me, So I got to see how the people were living, and they were living pretty bad. I mean, people were just digging holes out of the ground and throwing a sheet over it, and that was their home, or several occasions I saw on the way to the airfield, you would see like a militia might have a person circled and they're talking to them, and when we'd be on our way back from the airfield, that person would be laying dead in the street, and the bodies would just be there for days. I got to see how lucky I was to be here in the United States. And I also got to see that I wasn't an African American, I was an American. While we were there, we were assisting with the demilitarization of the city, the capital, which is Luanda, Angola. And while we were there, we would fly supplies out to the people in the bush. But I could also see the desperation in the people. When we would land the C-130s, we never powered down. and people would be running out there in between the props, trying to be first in line to get whatever we were giving out. Well, I would say it brought me from a boy to a man. You know, I went in as an 18-year-old boy. I think I was about 24 when I got out. But it taught me discipline and a work ethic. There's a difference between just being served and serving. And it was my mission to be a server, in the sense that I've always tried to do more than what was asked.
John Pruitt, First Lieutenant, United States Army Infantry. I joined the Army in 1965, and I say joined because back in that day, every young man knew that he was going to end up in the military service, either by being drafted or enlisted, or perhaps, as I did, through the ROTC program to avoid being drafted. So I decided to go in as an officer and took the 4 years of ROTC at Davidson College, and upon graduation, very shortly thereafter, ended up at Fort Benning, Georgia in infantry basic training camp, and then later on to Korea for 13 months, and then back to Fort Gordon for the last part of my service, training young men to go to Vietnam. I was at Fort Gordon in a training brigade, and Vietnam at this point, 1966, 67, was really heating up. And these young men were draftees, taken off the sidewalks of Newark or out of the farms in Iowa. Didn't have a choice, they were there, and they were going to go to Vietnam. So as their trainer, overseeing their training, my responsibility was to make them as tough as I could possibly make them. Because if they were tough, they would survive better, they'd have a better chance of surviving, they would cope with the things that were going to come their way better. So characteristically, I'm not a tough guy, I'm a pretty nice guy. But I felt I owed it to those young troops to be as tough and unforgiving and unlovable as I could possibly be. I felt that that was the greatest gift I could give them. I think the other thing that I remember very vividly was actually going to Korea after that long plane ride and getting off the plane at Kempo Airport and seeing an ox cart on the runway. Korea in 1965 was a very primitive place still recovering from the war. And to have that 13 months in that kind of environment, wearing the military uniform of the United States Army and dealing with all we had to deal with in terms of living conditions and military exercises and getting through the winter, that was a very formative time for me. I really became a man, I think, during that time. And there are a lot of young men who became men during the military service. They learned responsibility. They learned how to deal with adversity. They learned how to be away from home. And believe me, in 1965, if you were in Korea, you were away from home. There was no Skype, there was no Facebook, there was no internet. You couldn't really call home. I mean, you could, but it took a lot of work to do that. So you were away. And to be away for that long, for 13 months, and then come back to the States, you really understand the meaning of sacrifice. There were 20 of us in our class of 200 who got orders to Korea. We thought we were the unluckiest guys in the world because the other 180 got stateside assignments. It turns out we were the only 20 who didn't go to Vietnam. And I think about it a lot because I had some infantry brothers who did go to Vietnam who did not come back. I was pretty much out of harm's way, but I think of all of my compadres and so many others who did go to Vietnam and paid the ultimate price there. The most profound lesson I took from the military was the fact that it was a great leveling of people. There were officers, to be sure, and NCOs and enlisted men, but in terms of race, economic background, all of that was gone. And here you are in an Army unit with guys from all sorts of different backgrounds, life experiences, and your brothers. That was profound. And I think about that often. If society could have the same sort of leveling factor that those of us in the military had. We'd all learn a lot, we'd all get along much better, and I think we'd all understand each other much better. There was a point when I went into the Army, I thought, well, this is going to be a sacrifice. I'm going to Korea for 13 months. Looking back on it, it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Service is the giving of yourself to others or a worthy cause. It's very important to me. I look at military service as, yes, an obligation, but also giving of my life for something bigger than I, in this case, my country.
My name is Tibby DeGiulio. I was in the Army from 1967 to 1969. I was a sergeant when I got out. I served in Vietnam for a year.
My name is John Paulson. I served in the United States Marine Corps from 1968 to 1970. When I got out, I was a corporal, that's enlisted rank 4. And I served in country for about 9 months, and I was a combat infantryman.
I went into the military in 1967. I actually volunteered to be drafted. And the reason I did that is I felt after I had gone to college for 2 years, and I felt I needed more time to grow up. And I thought that was the best way for me to grow up, was to go in the military, serve my time, come back, and then go back to college, and that's what I did.
A similar story, surprisingly. I had spent 2 years in a junior college and was really wasting my time, all right? And I had a buddy of mine that had gone in the Marines a year before. He and I were good buddies from high school. And I thought, you know what? I don't want to go to a 4-year school. It didn't make any sense to me at my current state of mind. And I'd seen all the John Wayne movies, and I didn't want to miss the war. I wanted to go to war, okay? I also thought it'd be a good experience for me, never realizing it would be the experience it wound up being. But no, I joined because I wanted to serve and because this was going to be my chance to go to war, and I decided to join the Marines because my buddy had joined the Marines, and I also had an uncle who was in the Marines back in the day. In the Marine Corps, you go to the office where you enlist, you register, and you spend all day, I was in Chicago at the time, you spend all day waiting. You finally get on a plane, you fly. I flew to San Diego, California, where I went to boot camp. And at 11 o'clock at night, they hustle you out of a bus, and these drill instructors are yelling at you, and they have these yellow footprints. And you literally put your feet on the yellow footprints. It's hurting near midnight, and these guys are yelling at me, and I thought to myself, what in the world did I get myself into here? That was my first memorable experience of being in the service, was that night at midnight standing on those yellow footprints.
I happened to be in a unit in Vietnam that was air mobile. So they would just pick us up with a bunch of helicopters and drop us off to another area. And after I had been there about a month, we went into what we call a landing zone, where we wound up into a combat situation where about half of my company was wiped out. And that was probably the most memorable experience, I've ever had in my life, where within about 6 or 8 hours, half of the people you knew were gone. And it really just changed my outlook in life on, how fast and how fleeting life was.
I've been training as a combat infantryman since June of that year. And so come February, it was time for the unit I was with to rotate out. And in those days, whole units didn't go at one time, but there was a group of us that were just kind of marking time. In Camp Pendleton, when the orders came in, you're leaving. So 2 weeks later, took off, went to Okinawa. That's where they staged all the Marines, and then from there flew into Vietnam, into Da Nang, and then from there got assigned to a combat unit. I was with 1st Battalion, 9th Marine Regiment. Tagline was The Walking Dead, and one of the problems with this unit was about every 6 months they'd get into a pretty bad operation, and a bunch of people got killed and wounded. And that was the time that they needed people to resupply Alpha Company 1st Battalion, 9th Marines, so I was one of those, and that started my time with a combat unit. First Marine combat unit pulled out of Vietnam was 9th Marines, and that was in August of 1969. Well, it was a start. It was at the time President Nixon's first first attempt at getting people to withdraw. We were the first unit, and we were a combat unit. I literally went from walking patrol in the middle of the bush to flying back to Da Nang, got on a ship, and went to Okinawa.
Being in the 1st Air Cav, we had a lot of helicopters, so they would bring us out food and clothes and mail and ammunition and stuff like that, so we didn't really have to go into the back. And then when I was hit at the end of March of '69, and then I spent 2 months in the hospital, and then I stayed in the rear area until I was discharged. I was in a perimeter, a company perimeter, where we were out in the jungle and we had set up a perimeter. And unfortunately, we had some North Vietnamese soldiers attack us that night, and they threw in what we used to call satchel charges, which is basically, it's like a grenade, but it's made up of all different types of junk, nails, and they throw in there.
Bag.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was wounded in both my legs, and 4 times in the one leg and twice in the other, and that's how I was wounded. And I was medevaced in the next morning because they couldn't bring a helicopter in to medevac me out that night. And a little bit of a funny story. While I was waiting to be medevaced, I was laying on an air mattress in what we had cut out as a landing zone there, and I'm just laying there. And when I wake up, I look down, and there was a snake laying across my chest. Right, and it was just laying that right across my chest. Fortunately, I did the wrong thing. I went like that, and he just slid off my chest, and he didn't bite me. I got several awards that time. I got my Bronze Star with a V at that point. I got my Purple Heart. My unit got a Valorous Unit citation at that time also. One of the things that happened in Vietnam is you became very dependent upon the people who were both under you and over you. And it really taught you how to work together and how to organize and how to implement orders and implement instructions and implement details.
One of the things I learned in the Marines was you just don't give up, okay? You just push forward, and this is the way I treat many things. And you know, there's always another way to do this. There's a way of accomplishing whatever the mission is, and you just try different direction, different tack. But it's tough for me to accept the word no. I don't like the word no. Just keep on moving.
If you see the pictures of John and I from when we were in the service, you're going to say, "Who was that person?" It sure wasn't you.
I was younger then, okay? So if you're talking about story like
and
that,
lighter.
I'll tell you a cute story, yeah, a lot lighter. But we're on patrol one day and we're literally walking through, and the grass is literally this high. So you're walking through this path on this patrol, and you hear movement, you hear rustling. And so I can't remember if I was in front or one back from the front, but I hear the rustling, I hear the movement, and your first thought is, you know, this is the enemy crawling up, sneaking up on you. So everybody stops, and we hear the rustling, and everybody's ready to just open fire. And this wild boar, who's an animal about this big, comes cutting across the path, going from left to right, and that was his path, and this is our path. And I thought to myself, you came this close to being pork chops, buddy, okay? All right, that was,
No more MREs, right?
we all yucked
right.
at that one. That was pretty.
Oh,
pretty
actually,
fun.
we were in the service before MREs. We had what was called sea
Sea
rations.
which is
Right.
cans filled with food.
Right.
Okay, so what was your favorite sea ration?
Oh, well, we used
Which one
actually.
did you like the best?
Actually, my mother used to send me stuff from the States. She used to send me, I'm Italian, she used to send me things like pepperoni and cheese and stuff like that. Oh, well, at times, and as I say, we were in the first Cav. We used to get hot meals flown into us at night a lot of times. Not all the time, but a lot of times.
In the Marines, we never had hot meals flown in, okay? But when we went back to the rear area, obviously we had chow halls. But when you're out in the bush, you're eating sea rations all the time. And I think it was my mother sent me hot sauce, Tabasco sauce. And it turns out that all of the food in these sea rations is actually pretty bland. So they had some salt and pepper, but Tabasco sauce was the hot item. And you could take the most drab food and put a little hot sauce in there and make it worthwhile.
I can remember taking a bath in B-52 bomb craters. They would come in with a B-52 strike, and later on we would go through that area.
After it rained, fill them up?
Well, because the land was so low, they would fill up. It would be like a swimming pool. And they would be maybe 50 yards wide because these B-52s would be have such big holes in the ground when they did that, such bomb craters. And so I can remember going in a B-52 crater like that, and with a bar of soap, and with your clothes on, taking a bath, and keeping your boots on because there were shell fragments in the bottom, and you didn't want to cut your feet. So you take a bath on that with your boots on.
And we work with injured and wounded veterans who have come back from either the Iraq or Afghanistan war and want to do something new with their life. The group is called Phoenix Patriot Foundation. And the whole idea is, if you have a veteran that wants to get started in the next phase of his life, we'll help you. And so I work with a number of people. I work with one guy now who was a Marine. He was in Afghanistan, he was a top gunner. So he's a gunner on top of one of those convoy trucks that goes by, and got shot in the arm, got shot in the chest, but the bullet in the chest caught his flak jacket, so that was fine. He also got blown up on a patrol one day, and he got out of the service, and he was just wandering. He was helpless. He was homeless at one point. We got involved with him because he had been given a Habitat for Humanity home, but he didn't have enough money for closing costs and lawyers' fees. So I heard about it, and our foundation donated, I think it was like $1,400 to get him started. And I've been working with him. I meet with him once a month, and we go over basic budgeting. He went in the service and he was very young and had never run a budget, didn't really know how to do that, but he's 100% disabled, and he had a pretty good, livable income coming in. He just didn't know how to manage his money. So literally, I meet with him once a month. We don't even talk. He hands me his phone so I can see the balances on his bank account, and then he knows whether he's going to get yelled at or whether he's going to get congratulated. But his latest plan is he wants to be a landlord. He wants to own all kinds of rental homes. He's going to be king of the rental home business.
I happen to be kind of a patriotic person, and I think the service probably reinforced that. And that's why I'm so proud to have this flag behind me here. There's different types of service. There's the military service, which was important, but then there's other service too, and it just reinforces the importance of helping others, working together, doing what you can, because we have to realize how fortunate we are to live in this country.
Serving this country, to me, helped me understand and appreciate the value of being in the United States and being an American. Obviously, as Tibby said, military is different than civilian service, but service to your country and service to your community, which is what we do now, is important.
Those were remarkable stories. One of the highlights of our Veterans Day events has been the medley of service songs, the part of the program when we ask our veterans in attendance to stand when they hear their branch's anthems. Those songs make us proud. So let's listen to them again while we take a look back at the city's Veterans Day tributes from years past. Thank you for honoring our veterans by listening to their stories and learning from their experiences. Stay safe.